God King Shanks. The legacy of Shanks's greatness continues to elevate as time goes on. The good word of the red hair wonder doesn't stop. Now my boy is on that Sly Cooper and Thieves activity. Metal Gear Shanks. Man is moving differently, okay? I didn't know that Solid Shanks could move like this, using the wound he got from BB as a measure of getting into the good graces of his compatriots, by blood, of course, the Figureland family. Shamrock, oh, I knew it. 24 years. I knew someone was missing from my life. What is going on right now? Shanks is playing a fantastic role. He is cooking with pig grease, and it tastes delicious. Delicious. Love to see it. Now, someone may say, hold up though, retcons. Not really. Not a retcon going on with a lot of the Shanks activity in this chapter. I had a double check, triple check, quadruple check, and I was okay, hold on. I can understand why folks saw it as retcon, but I realized now, no, not a retcon. But I'll get to that soon enough in the video. Because for this chapter review, the main meat here is going to be the story progression components for the chapter. There's a lot to discuss, so stay tuned, for sure.
Stay tuned.
But keep in mind that right now, we are 15 years out in the past, and the flashback started in chapter 1152, and that chapter was 14 years out. So when we see Shanks with Gabon chilling at Gabon's place, and then we find out that King Harald died that day when Loki and Jarul, they pull into the castle and so on and so forth. That's only 1 year away from what's going on right now in the latest chapter of One Piece. So this flashback should be coming to an end, I'll probably say December, but December a lot of breaks, so probably January, maybe, like I would say at the latest early February. So that all being said, let's dive headfirst into this chapter review with, first and foremost, the pace and chapter structure, 1. Number 2, the character elements of the chapter, 2. And then 3, the story progression components for the chapter. Now for the pace and chapter structure. For this chapter, we have a total about 6 parts, which is good. And a lot of these parts at the beginning are done in montage fashion-esque. So number 1 is we have a montage of news reporters kind of going around the Grand Line, trying to get intel on what's going on with a certain entity or something in the mist in the Grand Line running around destroying pirate ships. And we find out that it's Harald on the orders of the world government. Keep in mind that in the Grand Line, giants are not a common occurrence. In the New World, probably more so because you have Elbaf in the New World. But in the Grand Line, giants are kind of rare to see. And then in the other blues, giants are damn near myth. You have people in the Grand Line and reporters like Morgan and so on, they're running around getting intel about some gigantic thing in the mist that is destroying these pirate ships. But the montage begins on that note and then ends on the note when Harald arrives to the Holy Land. That begins part number 2. And part number 2 is when Harald is given the tattoo of a devoted blade, the Shallows Covenant. The Shallows Covenant, which is the lowest order of the covenants that tie to the true god, aka Emu. And then so this montage of sorts starts from there. And then we follow Harald as he then meets with Figureland Garling. Then we cut over to him in the Fisherman Island area. Then go over to him in Elbaf meeting Saul. And all of that is part number 2. So one section is kind of like a grandiose montage of what's going on in the world itself. And then number 2 is a montage following Harald's movements where he's going. Number 3 is gonna be 15 years ago, where we get to see what happened with Fisher Tiger and apparently Shanks in the Holy Land as Tiger freed the slaves. Part number 4 is going back to Harald, and we get to see the moment that Shanks talked about in chapter 1152, where Shanks met Harald in the Holy Land. And we're seeing that now in this chapter, where we get to see Shanks dressed in almost identical clothes that Shamrock is wearing in real time in the present. Part number 5 is that we jump back to Elbaf, and we get to see what's going on with Ida. Ida is sick. Actually, she was poisoned. And so it's essentially you see what's going on with Ida and how Loki and Hiruden are trying to do their own thing. Loki eats food, but Hiruden's gonna find a doctor somewhere abroad, things of that sort. But then number 6 is that we come back to Loki specifically in the Brewer's Village in Elbaf, where he finds that Ida was poisoned, which then sparks one of the most valid crash outs in One Piece. He destroys Brewer's Village, the hometown of his biological mother, Estrid, the mom that hated him the most. So once again, when it comes to pace and chapter structure, I would say pretty good. The montage at the beginning of the chapter, the 2 montages, they were, in terms of structure, all right, not the greatest. Doesn't matter too much because a lot of times, let's say you get flashbacks within flashbacks, none of that stuff there. Again, relatively fine for structure at the beginning of the chapter, much better after part 2, and then from part 3 onwards, smooth sailing. So I would say in terms of pace and structure, very good, like a 7.5 out of 10, 8 out of 10 in this category. Now, for character components for this chapter, number 1, obviously, without question, the God King, Shanks. Now, very important as a reminder here, it's only a year later that we see, again, in chapter 1152, where Shanks is chilling, comfortably being his normal self on Elbaf with Gabon. So knowing how Shanks has been for the entire story of One Piece, when you see Shanks say lines like this, and I quote, "I don't know you, you great lumbering peon. How dare you speak of me as if we are equals? I've always had blood of the figure land in my veins. Mark my words, I'll be a knight before you. Let's go, Shamrock. Tell me more of the Holy Land. I want to be the hero who captures the one responsible for the attack. Any clues?" That's my boy. That's my boy. My 3rd favorite character in One Piece. Not only moving with this activity, but sprinkles of my 2nd favorite character in One Piece, Sanji, beforehand, when he was Cloak and Dagger, Sly Cooper and Thieves, helping Fisher Tiger himself escape the Holy Land, opened up the armory for him so he can get all things he needed to free the slaves. That was like classic Sanji Water 7. Woo!
Bingo.
Bingo! It's the same Sly Cooper and Thieves activity. This was very surprising. First of all, I don't want to hear nothing about rat allegations when Shanks himself is moving like a damn panther. Wakanda forever, he's moving like a panther right now. The stealth, hunting the prey, this man, he is a lion hiding among lesser predators. It's amazing, all right? It's not a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's like a lion or a dragon in wolf's clothing. It's crazy. Shanks is here. So seeing Metal Gear Shanks is really throwing me off for a loop. I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. Seeing that Shanks could pull this off, he has the capability to convince everyone around him that he is in full lockstep with their ideas and ways, even though he's been in the Blue Sea, in the Lower Realm for 24 years. With Shanks, whole different lifestyle. Had a great time on Roger's ship, Oden, and so on and so forth, building his own crew. And despite probably knowing all this information, they still buy it. The Figureland family and the Holy Knights and the Holy Land, they still buy it to the point where he also gets that devoted blade tattoo. Even when Shanks says, "I hate everything down there," there is a visceral realness to it that he's able to exude. So again, I think it's phenomenal acting. It's phenomenal op activity on Shanks' work. The Lion Among Wolves. All right, it's beautiful and absolutely something I'm gonna hard glaze moving forward. Absolutely. And my guess, this is my guess, is that it's very clear that Blackbeard did scar Shanks' face beforehand, pretty recently too, because when Fisher Tiger goes for that swing and he grabs the bandage on Shanks' face, some blood does come out. So I'm assuming it's blood from the scars that Blackbeard gave him. But he's also, I think, using the wound that he got from Blackbeard as a means of gaining greater sympathy from people on the Holy Land. I guess for character number 2, and that is Shamrock. Shamrock in this chapter, he does say, and I quote, "You don't know how it feels to learn that you've wasted 24 years of your life. I always knew I was different from the others." This could mean a lot of different things, for sure, because Shamrock seems to be also someone that's well recognized in the Holy Land community as someone of great status and note, obviously as a Figure Land family member. But it's also noted too that by Garling, that if Shanks were to gain the Deep Covenant tattoo, then he would be on the same level as Shamrock. So it seems like it's not just, let's say, the idea of being a member of the Holy Knights, but also Shamrock himself is differentiating himself from the rest of the herd. And when he says that, there's some level of arrogance to it, and Shanks trying to match that arrogance. So all that to say is that in this chapter, there are, I think, subtle signs indicating Shamrock's own mentality, how that could lead to, let's say, in the future, him becoming the commander of the Holy Knights. That's revealed to us in chapter 1137. Also, in terms of character, for Shanks and Shamrock, we find out that I think Shanks is the younger brother of Shamrock. There is a thing called Irish twins, which is ironic because they have the red hair. That is very distinct even in the manga because there's that grayscale arc to it. But as twins, it looks like Shamrock came out first and then Shanks came out second, hence him being the younger brother. The Irish twins thing wouldn't apply here because that's a year apart. Finally, for character number 3 is going to be Loki. Loki himself does acknowledge for the first time that he does love Ida. Ida is the only mother figure that he's had in his life. We all know what happened with Estrid, where Estrid literally had him thrown off into the hell area of Elbath, and he had to climb all the way back up. In chapter 1156, we do see how Ida is very, very soft on Loki, where even though Loki's very crass to Ida, she does offer Loki to live with them. And even though everyone like Hyrudin and Mato and even I think Harald himself are saying like you're way too easy on Loki, you have to be tougher, she's still very motherly, very kind, very tenderly towards Loki. And then 2 chapters later, in chapter 1158, we do see Loki, after Harald and Rox have their fight, Loki was just kind of sitting there reading the papers by the coast near the bar, basically sulking, and Ida just comes to him and says, "Hey, you want some juice?" He's like, yeah. So Loki seeing Ida as effectively his mom makes a lot of sense. And she was also as a sign of comfort for Loki when Harald was out and about doing things abroad, which makes the crash out only more valid come the end of the chapter, for sure. So that's it when it comes to the character components of the chapter. And now we have the story progression elements of the chapter, which are juicy. And first and foremost, the story progression, the most key thing here is that what we find out is after God Valley, Harald, number 1, is now running around and he's working at the behest of the Navy to uphold order across the seas, even in the Grand Line. And so when someone like Harald is coming out of nowhere from his giant ship through the mist, cutting down pirate ships in a single swing, folks are going to be yapping and their tale is going to be essentially the level of myth. That's what's going to be. So Harald was running around for a long period of time, working for the Navy at the behest of the world government. During that point in time, of course, you have the rise of various pirates, and the main thing, of course, is that you have Goldie Roger Company. They do what no one else can ever do. They do circumnavigate the entire globe, and Roger is now king of the pirates, Gold Roger. We also have the rise of the Great Pirate Era after his execution, and in a response to the rise of the Great Pirate Era, we have, and I quote, Navy headquarters recruited over a dozen giants from various regions in the hopes of bolstering their ranks. Now, giants, they do get ragged on, but I think, and I would say for a very long time, unjustifiably so. Unjustifiably so. The giants at Marineford, all of them, unequivocally were vice admiral. Now, does that mean much? In the grand scheme of things, yes. But in the real, sometimes no, because that rank is all over the place. But the fact that the giants have such a high baseline in the marine system, and Emu revealed that it values the entire country, and even seeing things all going back to 867, where Mother Caramel, she was the one to recruit the first ever giant for the Navy, John Giant. And she used that as leverage in her negotiations with Cypher Pole. The giants are a valuable asset. Again, Big Mom made the quote, a very distinct quote, that if she had the giants, she would have been what? King of the Pirates. And seeing how so many people are valuing the combat ability of the giants across the world, of all different factions, it only proves that point even further. The insanity that was the Great Power Era's boom. The Marines try to counter that with giants. Now, the next different story is very important. That's critical, like actually critical. It's understanding the tattoo system that we have going on for the Holy Knights, for the 5 Elders, and in doing so, effectively understanding more about Emu's power system. Now, don't ask me how Harald fit in that room. I have no idea. But Harald was able to meet the Elders in Pangea Castle in their room.
Holy Jesus. What is that?
In their room. The man is the size of a skyscraper, and he's fitting inside of a room. But I think the entire castle has kind of like rescaled, reoriented, because these rooms are pretty big, but now they're way bigger than I thought they were. Like, whoa. He can fit inside one of the rooms. I mean, we see Pangea Castle, and it's way bigger than, let's say, most of the city, but that big? Okay. So, Harald is inside one of the rooms and he's talking to 5 elders, and then he gets the tattoo that we see on Shanks' arm, the devoted blade tattoo. Now, this is the same tattoo that we hear Gunko has in chapter 1160 when we see her killing the citizens of God Valley, and we have the celestial dragons kind of betting who's gonna win what, and then one guy feels that he has the individual rank. That bet is on Gunko, even though she's only a devoted blade of God. Though keep in mind that when we see her, or maybe her mom, when Rox pulls up the Emu in chapter 1155, we do see Gunko. She's one of the maids, one of the priestesses that take care of Emu. So she may have had no rank at that point in time, or a devoted blade of God. She still was. But her age was relatively the same. So whatever's going on with Gunko could be something that's outside the paradigm Emu in terms of her looks, where she looks relatively the same from that point, because God Valley was 38 years ago, but when Rox pulled up the Emu, that was 56 years ago. So whatever's going on with her probably does not involve the devoted blade seal. It is revealed by the Gorosei that the devoted blade is a Shallow's covenant with the quote-unquote true God, Emu. It is a mere trace of the bond. End quote. But the Depths Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant are reserved for only 13 exclusive individuals. And I'm assuming it's 13 at that point in time. So I would say, of course, the 5 Elders, and then minus 5 from 13, that leaves you 8 Holy Knights. So you have 8 Holy Knights and 5 Elders. They had access to the Depths Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant. I'm assuming that last one, the Abyssal one, is the one that all the 5 Elders have. When Garling became a 5 Elder, he also got the Abyssal Covenant. When we see Saturn die, it was removing the Abyssal Covenant that it had applied to Saturn, and then probably gave that to Garling. When we have them talk about the covenants, the pacts, the tattoos, Harald asked them, what is this God you speak of? Harald was able to get the tattoo of the Shallow Covenant without meeting Emu. So now we have to wonder if the Shallow Covenant is something that is granted to people by the elders themselves and not Emu. That's very possible now. Lesser contracts can be given out by people that have the Abyssal Covenant as a means of protecting Emu's identity. That is very possible now. Ethan says, if the day should come that you are made a proper knight, then you will know the truth in the depths of the world. Meaning that once you get the Depths Covenant and the Abyssal Covenant, now you are aware of Emu's existence. And so my guess here is that the tattoo that we see sometimes on the Whole Knight sleeves, where there's an addition to the cross and circle, where you have a sort of like hook to that, I think that is the Depths Covenant. Terminology wise, I do prefer Shallow Sea, the Deep Sea, and then the Deep Sea. I think the wordplay is a lot better there, because the wordplay of shallow and then deep sea and then deep sea actually mimic what we see with Skypiea, with the White Sea and the White Sea being utilized for Emu's powers, where it's the deep and then the deep sea. So the way you can view this now, I think, is that you can view the tattoos that Shanks has, that Harald has, as internships, where you're not a part of the fold, you're not part of the company yet. You have to earn your stripes to actually be member of the company, to actually get a real salary from the company. The interns don't get the real sauce. Now, whether or not Harald was allowed to use the magical circle in the throne room to teleport to the Holy Land, we don't know. We haven't seen any sort of teleportation lightning at all going on in the entire Abad flashback. So I have no idea at this point in time if it was allowed to or not. But it wouldn't surprise me as an intern. It wouldn't surprise me if he couldn't use it because the interns don't have access to company assets. So this adds a lot of depth, every pun intended. This adds a lot of depth to Emu's power system, and from there we can kind of gauge more things about how Emu operates in the future. But in terms of story progression, this is a major detail, but not even close to being the other major detail in this chapter. Then we have the reveal of another location in the Holy Land called Shangara. It's the same name as a Zimbabwean dance, but apparently in One Piece it's the Holy Knights Temple, the Knights Temple land the gods. So this seems to be where holy knights, where they reside, where they chill. And it's very different from the usual city where these celestial dragons live. Either it's the meeting place of the holy knights where they normally convene, or it's where they live. But most of it seems very Greek, the way it's designed, with the gigantic pillars and the architecture. It feels very, very Greek, ancient Greece. Now after this, we do find out probably who Shaggy is. Remember, in this arc, Loki has been talking to someone on a Den Mushi, and we don't know who that person is, but they refer to that person as Shaggy or Mosa. And in this chapter, we find out Loki and Shirahoshi were betrothed. So even though Loki at some point in time, according to Big Mom, apparently had the hots for Lola, no. This man was already engaged to Shirahoshi. And the person on the Den Mushi that was talking to him for that period of time was probably Shirahoshi. So when Mosa or Shaggy has to leave and take care of something, there could be now a situation that's going on Fishman Island. It could be, I think, King Neptune. I'm not against that idea either. But it's either King Neptune now or Shirahoshi. And now you have to see the idea, the possibility that something is going on right now on Fishman Island that is unbeknownst to the Shrek Crew and company. That's very possible. Now, before we go back to Fishman Island again for this video, real quick, I need to mention about Saul. So 20 years ago, Saul arrives on Elbaf, and Harald, remember, he's a very forward-thinking guy. He's trying to do whatever he can to really bolster the image of the giants across the world. And one of those things is probably, of course, focusing on the youth and making sure that they are more up and up, they're more studious, and more understanding of the world around them, so they're more likely to be accepted by other races, other peoples. And given that mindset with Harald, the idea is to make a school for the kids. So the Walrus Academy that's built next to the Owl Library is an idea that Harald comes up with using Saul, who's very learned, 20 years ago on the spot. I'm not too sure if that means that Harald knew about Saul's past, meaning Saul actively fight against the world government and the Marines to try and save Robin and O'Hara and Olivia and so on. If he did know, knowing Harald and his purpose, trying to get his people into the fold of the world government, if he was housing someone like Saul, who they know that he was a traitor to the cause, they probably wouldn't like that at all. But I'm going to guess that Harald didn't ask at all about Saul's backstory because he's focused more so on the future of Elbaf and giant prosperity rather than the past. Now, back to Fishman Island, which is one of the most controversial points in this whole chapter by far and away. If not, no, it is, I think, the most controversial point in the entire chapter. And this point is Fisher Tiger. So apparently, 15 years ago, the shocking incident when Fisher Tiger saved all the folks in the Holy Land. Who was there to assist Fisher Tiger? Shanks. And Shanks, when he passes by Fisher Tiger, we do see that blood streak on his face as he's dashing, past Fisher Tiger. And then he tells him, I left the army unlocked. Here's how to get there. So it looks like there was a plan in place that Shanks had. Probably beforehand, potentially, Tiger met Shanks and they set this up, potentially. But the key thing here is this. How is such a Tiger in this situation being chained up, looking like a slave, when we know that he went on a voyage, got captured, got turned to a slave. He came back after several years in the Holy Land, went back to Fishman Island, then when again he climbed the Red Line, he freed all the slaves, and then became the world-renowned Fisher Tiger, former captain of the Sun Pirates. Doesn't that retcon what happened back then, where Shanks all of a sudden now is here when Tiger's clearly cuffed up, chained up as a slave, and then he's running away, and then now the slaves are free? Those are key points that we get in chapters 621, 622, and 623. Doesn't that retcon what Oda did then? No. So when we see Shanks pull up on Fisher Tiger in the Holy Land, that was 15 years ago. But in chapter 621, the same chapter where we do see Tiger return from his travels, that was 16 years ago. So 1 year before Shanks was saving Tiger in the Holy Land, before that, Tiger was already there. This other timeline should work. Fisher Tiger goes on his voyage, and then for several years, he's captured as a slave. He escapes the Holy Land, and he leaves by himself, okay? But he saw all the slaves there. Fisher Tiger goes back down to Fisher Island, talks to Neptune about what he saw there, you know, human nature, and then he goes back up to the Holy Land to try and free the slaves, knowing full well it would cause a lot of big issues with Fishman Island and the Holy Land. Whether he climbed or not, we don't know. It's said he climbed back up the Red Line, but that could be a lie. There is a grandiose sort of story narrative that parts of what he's saying are lies. He's not telling the truth completely. Maybe he actually got captured again. Maybe, let's say, it was done purposely. Maybe it involved Shanks this time around, to where it was actually a play to get him captured in the first place. Hence why he left the army open for Fisher Tiger. The details are the details. But based on the timeline and that alone, we know that, again, Fisher Tiger returned 16 years ago to Fishman Island. Shanks is there in the Holy Land 15 years ago, a year after. In this latest chapter, who do we see as well? We see Koala. And in chapter 622, what do we see? We see Koala meet for the first time the Sun Pirates. That was 12 years ago, which means that when news is spreading at the beginning of that chapter, 622, when everyone finds out that Tiger went to Holy Land and freed all the slaves, he did that raid in the Holy Land, that was 15 years ago. In terms of story narrative, that's huge. Shanks was there to assist Fisher Tiger in freeing the slaves as he was operating as an op, a heavy op, Metal Gear Shanks in the Holy Land. And his motive right now, it seems to be intel. My guess here is that in the same way that Harald didn't know about Emu, nor did Shanks, he probably want to gain more insight on various things like the Holy Land, and of course their assets, because again, he's a pirate, so if there are things to steal, he would definitely want to do that for sure, like treasure. But also, if there's a grandiose play that Shanks has in mind, which he definitely does, that may involve something like Emu, he have to go to verify that. The question though really is, how does Blackbeard fit in all this stuff? Because the wound on his face appears to be fresh. If that's the case, where was Blackbeard? Was he in the Holy Land too? Was he at that one port near the Red Lion, the one that Sabo Company went to for the reverie? Blackbeard probably had to be in the vicinity somewhere. There was a theory that someone brought up to me during my stream, which reminds me, if you haven't seen my live stream reaction to the chapter, you have to go where? You have to go, of course, to my Cole Requiem YouTube channel for the full live stream reaction. And you can also see on twitch.tv as well, the whole thing. But someone had an idea that maybe he stopped by Lucia Kingdom, because we do see in God Valley that country is mentioned. They're gonna go there, Blackbeard and his mom Eris. So it's possible that, let's say, Blackbeard ran into Shanks at Lucia Kingdom, they had a fight or some sort of scuffle, wherever it happened exactly, and then Shanks got scarred. But Lucia Kingdom is nearby the Holy Land. We know that because Emu decided to nuke Lucia Kingdom because of proximity. In chapter 1086, Emu literally says, destroy Lucia Kingdom. Why? Because it's close. It's close. So if it's close to the Holy Land, and that's a spot where Blackbeard and his mom were staying at for a period of time, maybe Eris was there on Lucia Kingdom, let's say before it got nuked into oblivion, of course, and then BB was there, let's say visiting his mom, and then bada bing, bada boom, he ran to Shanks, who was going to Holy Land, because maybe he had a plan with Fisher Tiger all along to try and free the slaves. But he decided to stay because of his heritage, his lineage, which someone did say as well that could be the case where he learned about that from Blackbeard. If Blackbeard remembered what happened when he was 2 years old, and he saw Figureland Garling, Shanks looks like Garling, his dad. So maybe you actually point out that you look like your damn father, Garling. So that could be, let's say, a catalyst as to why Shanks became Metal Gear Shanks, right? Incognito mode in the Holy Land. So there are plays and machinations in place here, but this can go extremely deep. Make no mistake, it can tie in so many different plot threads together in a very beautiful way. But Shanks is here in the Holy Land, and we actually find out in chapter 1152, when this flashback started, we find out that there was something that Shanks wanted to talk about King Harald with. That is one of the reasons why he went to visit Gabon. He wanted to talk to King Harald because he met him there at the Holy Land. And we see in this chapter, Harald is kind of off on Shanks. When he turns around, he knows that something is up, but he's not too sure exactly what's up with Shanks. So there seemed to be some sort of dialogue that Shanks had with him again later on in this flashback, or at least wanted to have with him after a year after he left the Holy Land. But at that point in time, the tragedy struck. But keep in mind that again, Shanks wanted to talk to Harald about things he discovered in the Holy Land. So these right here are just tremendous. They're tremendous points for story progression across the board. Across the board. Not just with the arc itself, but for the overall story. And then we kind of tally it all up very nicely. Well, quote unquote nicely, but in a meaningful way with Ida, where Ida is sick, and now we're kind of gonna see why she's no longer around. Ida was poisoned, and it sucks here to stay because Ida has been, for the most part, a really awesome woman. She's been outstanding. She's been a true mother figure for Loki, for Hyrule and company. She is beloved by many across the entire country. However, because she is not a native, she's not an Elbathian giant. Remember that, right? There is a lot of bias with Elbathian giants and non-Elbathian giants. That was a plot point early in the arc. Discrimination is key. That's why Hyrule can't be king, because he has Muggle blood in his system, Ida's blood. But Loki could/can be king, because he has pure Elbathian giant blood coursing through his system. But Harald has been pleading to the elders of Elbath. Apparently there's elders to Elbath, and these elders have been denying Harald's request time and time again to make Ida into the queen, the official queen of Elbath. That's why for the most part, she still lives in the Hell area, not in the Sun area. Also, on a side note, Fisherman Village in Elbath. We get a better look at the sword. Yeah, this sword has for sure been used. Maybe Nika, maybe a crazy extra uber giant, maybe the continent pillar. I don't know. But this sword for sure belonged to somebody. This sword is way too detailed. It looks way more distinct than the sword in Wild Country does. The giant sword on Onigashima. It looks more detailed and distinct than that. I think someone had the sword for sure, and they used it in the distant past long ago. It's never a detail brought up in the arc. I don't know why. Because it's there and it's huge and it should have a purpose. But whatever. We will get there hopefully soon enough. Hopefully. That being said though, Ida, poisoned by clan members of Estrid's clan, where these assholes all conspire together to poison Ida. And Loki crashes out. He wipes out damn near all of Brewer's village. Because in a rage, because the woman that took care of him for a lot of his life, Ida, got poisoned by his blood mother's relatives. Valid. Very valid. And again, a very good point for his character as well. A lot of his villainy misunderstood, because you can argue easily, very easily, that if he just, let's say, kept some of them alive, he could have proven to the other giants in the area that, hey, my mom was poisoned by these assholes. But instead, it seems like he just killed them all. We've seen like that one giant old dude, his neck starts to snap under Loki's grip. No twist from me. But at the same time, you're not convincing other giants that you're a good person. So that is it when it comes to this chapter review. There was a lot to dissect, a lot to discuss, a lot to kind of confirm and theorize, so on and so forth. But this chapter is an outstanding chapter of One Piece. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. This week's chapter of One Piece is a 9 out of 10. Very damn good for pacing structure, really good for character, and outstanding for story. Outstanding. 9 out of 10 in my book. But let me know your guys and gals stance on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boys' video content, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.
See you. Bye bye.